to answer to questions you may have.
Okay, it seems that Sari is here. So, Tommy, I think we can then start.
Okay, welcome also Sari, and we could hear your voice. Very good to have you online. And once again, welcome everybody to this online session. And first of all, thank you to University of Jyväskylä for having us jointly sort of prepare this session and having this discussion and panel. My name is Tomi Järvinen. I'm the Director for International Cooperation in FCA for some 7 years now, but before that I was 12 years in Africa and worked a lot with education in different roles before. Of course, we are gathered today around the publication of Global Education Monitoring Report here in Finland, and it relates to inclusion. And I like the phrase in the front of that publication, that inclusion is all means all. So everybody has to be on board and would need a chance to be on board. Also last year, FCA, together with the University of Helsinki and UNESCO, we had an Education in Emergencies high-level seminar in Helsinki, and inclusion was a huge part of that, or the theme of that gathering, with the theme and contributing to the theme, leaving no one behind. We could cite many examples how inclusion is not reality in many parts of the world, and we could say that also here in Finland, and I think this COVID situation has brought up issues around that to our minds and to the public discussion as well. But I'll just cite one concrete example that in that high-level panel, the UNESCO representative told us that 2% of the girls in the lowest income countries complete secondary education. So 98% don't. So I think that's one indicator of where we are globally in terms of realization of inclusion. And when we talk about inclusion today, we look at very broad variety of issues: disabilities, economical backgrounds, immigration, humanitarian situations, poor infrastructure, challenges in teacher education, and so on and so forth, that all contribute to the fact that quality education is not accessible and available for all of us. Today, we would like to focus on the digital aspect of inclusion, and we as FCA, we work a lot around that, as I know that many of you do. And just to say that we are not naive about it, we know the challenges and the hurdles that relate to digitalization. It can be a blessing or it can be a curse depending on where you are. And when we talk about digitalization, I'd like to also emphasize, and I think this will be presented through our experts who are with us, and I'll introduce them in a moment. And when we talk about that, it's sometimes very low-tech kind of solutions, then into the more high-tech solutions that we have been used to in the more developed countries. So even this, we need to keep the perspective in mind, and we don't want to underestimate the hurdles that are there, but we want to be very solution-oriented, and we know that digitalization is coming. It's a phenomenon that cannot be stopped, and on a positive note, it can be used to ensure that in the future more people are included in accessing quality education around the world. And it's not only about practical solutions on the ground where we focus today, but then it's a big policy debate, and definitely we hope as FCA, and I know that many of us here, that Finland will take a leading role as a country to also influence policies so that school materials would be accessible in situations where there are disruptions, humanitarian catastrophes, and so on and so forth. But let me introduce the panelists who are with me today. And Sari Turunen is joining us from Cambodia. As you can see, she's really on the field and waving for us. Welcome. Sari is our education advisor in Cambodia. And then another person from the field perspective, literally feet on the ground in Uganda, is Kefas Mugabi, our senior area manager and TVET specialist, FCA Uganda. And last but not least, we have Tuuli Nalisvaara, education specialist, Teachers Without Borders, FCA, with us today. So once again, welcome to all, and let's move on to the subject matter today and start by a few questions to our panelists, and we go in the order of Sari, Kefas, and Tuuli, and 3 minutes each. So if you could tell us shortly about your work in the Finchurch Age education programs, and especially in relation to the most fragile context, that is, of course, many times the skein that hinders inclusion in reality. So please go ahead, Sari.
Thank you, Tommy, and Tsumrap Sur, everyone. Greetings from Osrolaulek village from Battambang province. I'm visiting a primary school here today. So I work as an education advisor for FCA Cambodia. I'm based in Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia, but I'm often traveling to provinces to work at practical level with the teachers, school counselors, schools itself, and also the local education authorities. My job is very versatile. In addition to developing different approaches and learning methods here in the local context, I provide coaching and mentoring to teachers, to school counselors, and I also conduct trainings. On top of that, I work at national level, contributing to the development of curricula and also career guidance and counseling strategy, for example. Let me briefly describe you the context where I work. First of all, Cambodians are very friendly, hospitable, warm-hearted people. What we Finns could learn from them is how to seize the moment and how to live one day at a time. Cambodia has made great progress in educating its children during the past 20 years or so. Currently, 97% of the children are enrolled in primary education. However, by the time they are 17 years of age, more or less 55% of them have already dropped out from school. FCA works here in areas where a family of 5 needs to cope with $1 per day only. And also children are contributing to this family income by working in the rice fields or fishing at far locations. Many of the families can only afford 1 child to go to school. And there are long distances to school, especially after primary school level, and there are no means to reach the schools, no transportation. Currently, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused interruptions in education. Schools have been closed since mid-March, but are progressively opening now for grades 9 and 12. There are losses of livelihoods. Cambodia depends on tourism and textile industries, and both have been greatly affected by the pandemic. On top of that, during the past weeks, we have had heavy rains and floods, and that have caused severe damages to people's homes and also their livelihoods.
Thank you so much, Sari. So that is a description of the context where you work in Cambodia. Kefas, how is it in Uganda?
Yes, thank you very much, Tommy. Greetings from Uganda. My name is Kefas Mugabi. I am the Senior Area Manager, FinChurch Aid, and I'm the TVET specialist advising the whole country of Uganda. I have worked in the fragile area of Ramwanja refugee settlement since 2015, when FCA TVET project started. I started in the capacity of the project coordinator, implementing only the TVET project, but now I am the senior area manager, implementing ECD, primary education, secondary education, and then vocational education. And we are the lead agency implementing for UNHCR in Ramwanja. So I have a lot of lessons learned since 2015 when we started the project in Ramwanja. Ramwanja refugee settlement hosts 73,000 Congolese refugees, and 68% are children and youth. The settlement is found in the southwestern Uganda. My work, like I told you, my work is majorly promoting access to quality inclusive education. And when we talk about access, children and students lack the minimum basic school requirements in Ramwanja. As you can imagine that some children are unaccompanied minors, refugees. Unaccompanied minors means these children who come without any guardian or any parent, and they are taken care of by UNHCR and other agencies, people with disabilities. So these ones lack the minimum school requirements like books, pens, and lunch if not provided. They also walk long distances because they don't have schools close to them in the neighborhood, nor or limited access to TVET centers. For example, in Ramwanja, it is only FinChurch Aid that built a TVET center. And this one takes a limited number due to limited resources. I want to give you an example. Every year, 1,500 trainees use yearn for vocational skills training, but FinChurch Aid can only take 680 per year. When we talk about quality, the government has limited support to teachers in pedagogical competencies. The teachers they train are not enough for the primary schools, so you find untrained teachers carrying out lessons in primary school. There's limited funding to procure learning materials in schools, like the textbooks, balls, games. So instructional and learning material is a challenge. So these untrained teachers, there is a study by UGACO, 67% of the teachers were exposed to exams done by their own children, and the 67% failed the exams they give children themselves. So there's also lack of effective documented support supervision. That is the experience I have in Ramwanja. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Tuuli, I think you're currently in Finland, but the experience from the field, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tommy. Yes, I am a primary school teacher by profession, but been working for Teachers Without Borders as a volunteer. So first, about Teachers Without Borders. It operates under FCA as a strategic partner. It's a network for teachers and education professionals to share their skills on a global platform. Based on the contextual needs, the network supports the development of the education structures and professional development of colleagues in the most fragile contexts. It also highlights two-way collegial learning, for example, via global citizenship education in Finnish schools. My first experience of Teachers Without Borders volunteering was a year ago. I was working with a mobile mentoring project in Uganda, close to the border of South Sudan. More than 50 teachers, both nationals and refugees, participated in our face-to-face trainings. In addition to these trainings, the teacher had mentors, volunteer teachers based in Finland. And they were in touch with their colleagues in Uganda by mobile phones using WhatsApp application. And the Finnish teachers gave support and small tasks for them and helped to bring into practice what they had just learned during the training. Then this year, I have supported education activities for Kenya country program via distance because of the COVID situation. A group of volunteers with Kenyan colleagues focused on supporting the early childhood development teachers to strengthen the skills required to implement new curriculum. Like in many fragile contexts, teachers' pedagogical skills need to be strengthened. Many of the teachers are not educated, have little teaching background. They face challenges in many areas, like how to handle large numbers of learners. To have more than 100 learners in one group is not exceptional. Under normal circumstances, this training would have been face-to-face. Due to adapted distance training and modified for WhatsApp. So we went through the face-to-face material and turned it to short texts, assignments, audios, images that could be received through WhatsApp. And the trainings are actually about to start soon over there. So I'm looking forward to hear how well it meets the needs. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you. And we can say the challenges in the environments, they run from getting pens to the pedagogical needs in the teacher training and in the environment as such. Thank you so much. Let's go to the issue of inclusion. So if you could give us some examples about inclusion in your environments. And I would ask you to perhaps be a little bit more shorter than we had agreed originally, since we were a bit late. So if you can really focus on some main examples so that we will leave some time for the discussion that probably is very interesting in terms of digitalization, considering these environments that we have just mentioned. But Kefas, what about inclusion in the fragile context?
Yes, once again, thank you so much, Tommy. First of all, inclusion in education is basically providing a learning program that meets or caters for all interests of learning. For example, people with special needs, overage children, teenage mothers, those that need vocational education and training. In my experience, the biggest gap is that there are no or very few qualified personnel to handle inclusion education in Rwamwanja. Take an example of blind children. In Rwamwanja, we don't have any qualified personnel that can handle the blind. We also have lack of assistive devices like the braille machines, even wheelchairs. And also, pupil-teacher ratio is really very big. For example, the standard one is 1 to 53, one teacher to 53 children in a class, but in Rwamwanja, it is 1 to 220. So the teacher will not have enough time to assess the learning outcomes. But I want to say a little bit of what Finchurch Aid has done in Rwamwanja and also other areas in a few minutes. Finchurch Aid has carried out in-service training and workshops for teachers in different areas of inclusion education. There are few schools established with the basic equipment like Braille. For example, Pekere Primary School in Adjumani, Apo Primary School in Iumbe, and soon we'll have Sweswe Primary School in Chaka. So Church Aid has also created a referral system. For example, we work with humanity and inclusion to address some of these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kefas. Tuuli, what about your experience?
Thank you. Inclusion has been one of the key topics in every training I have participated. We want to highlight the importance of educating girls and children with disabilities, but inclusion is also about the children's right to education, about finding answers to questions like how to reduce the risks of dropping out, how to get the children back to school, how to provide quality education in safe environments. And in this context, we work in one of the challenges is also the language barrier between teachers and learners, since they often are from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. For example, a child comes to Kenya as a South Sudanese refugee, and with parents, he or she speaks native language. At school in Kenya, the local children speak some local language, and the official teaching language is most likely English. So that's very challenging for everyone. One of the goals is that whenever the teachers are planning their work and lessons, they always have an inclusive approach to it. How can everyone participate into the lesson? We also do a lot to change people's attitudes towards education. In Uganda, FCA participated to Back to School campaign, traveled to small rural villages where the local community leaders, teachers, and parents were gathered to talk about the problems and possibilities in their community. And we had a chance to participate in discussions. One part of education work is to engage with the community leaders and other key persons like headmasters to discuss the values and the importance of inclusion and teacher training. How well the schools take into account the needs of, for example, children with disabilities still varies a lot due to various reasons. The FCA-supported schools are usually more prepared as they train the teachers and support the families to get the disabled children to school. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution. And then Sari from Cambodia.
Yes, thank you, Tuuli and Kefas. Here in Cambodia, what FCA does is that we enable inclusive education in a way that we build and develop basic infrastructure at schools because there's a lack of water, sanitation and hygiene facilities, which especially impacts girls and children with disabilities. We have introduced a new method here in Cambodia, but perhaps very familiar in Finland, and that is visiting homes of children who are in danger of dropping out. Organizing family events, not to only engage caregivers, but to also raise awareness of the importance of education, further studies, and meaningful career choices. Collaboration with families and religious leaders is very important in order to prevent early marriages and thus enabling right to continuous education for girls. Then some 40% of the children in our target areas cannot properly read and write when they transit from primary school to grade 7. To address this challenge, FCA, with its partner organization, PKO, is conducting reading clubs introduced by our volunteer, Elina. These reading clubs support children with difficulties in reading and writing, and therefore opening wider windows to the world of learning. Children learn in small groups and in a comfortable environment under a tree like this, or in a nearby pagoda, and not always in a school environment. We address different learning styles. Different styles are accepted and encouraged. Moreover, it is volunteering members from the community who are trained as tutors for these reading clubs. So it promotes local engagement and involvement. With school counseling activities, we are supporting young people to develop their study skills, increase their self-knowledge, understanding of their strengths, and so on, which eventually leads to more fitting career choices and hopefully better livelihoods in the future.
Thank you so much, Sari. 40% cannot read or write properly when they move on from the primary level. We heard about other challenges related to infrastructure from other countries, all sorts of challenges. And now then digitalization. How is it even sensible to discuss digitalization or the use of these sort of methods in learning when we hear all of this? So Sari, please go ahead from there.
From digitalization. Since mid-March, as I mentioned, the schools have been closed and they are resuming progressively. So there was an urgent need to find alternate approaches and methods. One of the biggest challenges here has been that the facilitation of the sudden digital has been quite hard. Cambodia is a country where traditional teacher-led methods and unequal opportunities to access online resources are still prevailing. Over 60% of the children and the families in our target areas and communities, they don't have access to TV lessons that are now introduced by the ministry, or they don't have access to any online resources. Most of the people do not even have access to electricity supply. So given the described context, a blend of very feasible learner-friendly approaches to facilitate remote learning was needed. And for instance, to help students to get uninterrupted support and maintain their learning routine, used short video lessons that are filmed in order to orientate students to the topics and lessons, so they could perhaps a bit smoother way continue their learning at home. These video lessons or shooting videos is kept very, very simple, handheld smartphones. And these video lessons are sent to students by chat groups. To reach also those children and families who do not have online access, we introduced the concept and activity of mobile learning centers. These centers are cruising around villages and districts. This means that they are tuk-tuks and teachers driving motorbikes around to meet the students, conduct lessons, distribute learning materials, and also using tablets and phones with children and young people so they can have access to online lessons and to learning applications.
Thank you so much, Sari. I think very good viewpoints on that. Kefas, digitalization in Rwanda, in Uganda.
Yes, thank you once again, Tommy. I will start by sharing with all of you that COVID-19 has demonstrated than ever before that digitalization offers the most efficient and timely way of learning. I want to give you an example in Rwanda, comparing with other areas, like students in the US and Europe continued to learn digitally when the schools were closed because of the pandemic. In Rwanda, it was a different case. We would start by distributing radios to homesteads that they can have at least a lesson taught by teachers radio. And this was also very difficult for teachers because they were not trained to teach on a radio. They are used to classroom situation. So I approach it in a way that we can compare the current situation that calls for digitalization of education. So the question is, how can digitalization boost education? By training some teachers to become TOTs, a group of teachers trained to use digital platforms to train others. For example, in the case of Rwanda, we need mobile mentorship that can be done from one area to another area. Digitalization can help to build teachers' capacity to support inclusion education, even when we cannot afford face-to-face for cost cutting and time issues. The challenges: technologies require power source and a reliable network. For example, in Rwanda, we don't have electricity, and some areas where they use solar are very few, but the rest of the area of the settlement, there is no power. And then the network is not reliable. I want to give you a scenario. I spent a night in Kampala so that I can have a clear network for this conference. So if I was in Rwanda, the chances of not communicating would be really very high. And we also need skills in using the digital platforms. For example, some teachers are computer illiterate and some cannot operate even a smartphone. And then lastly, there's a lack of digital infrastructure, the computers, the internet, the projectors. This is a situation in Rwanda as it comes to digitalization of education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kefas. And then Tuuli, what kind of challenges and experiences have you had in this regard? Tuuli, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Yes, I have noticed same kind of challenges that Sari and Kefas already told. So one is unstable electricity supply and poor internet connectivity. I remember from Uganda that after every hard rain was followed by power cuts. And also some areas, for example, in South Sudan are still without any radio coverage. And the use of internet and devices like smartphones is still expensive for most of the people, and solar light chargers are the only charging options in rural areas and refugee settlements. So I think digitalization widens the gap between people with different economic backgrounds and people between rural and urban areas. And during the mobile mentoring project, I realized that smartphones were not only access to the training, but access to internet, which has its pros and cons. Suddenly, all the information is within the reach, and that needs critical thinking and critical media literacy skills that should be part of the teacher studies. Then what comes to distance teaching, digitalization may support the top performers who already have good learning preparedness and self-regulation skills, more likely than the one who have challenges with their studies. And for example, if you think about a child who is listening to a national lesson broadcast in which the teacher speaks English with a different accent than the child is used to, he or she cannot ask any questions from teacher, get any feedback. How good will the learning results be? It depends a lot of the child. Then some successes. Due to the hierarchies in the educational culture, it's not common for teachers to bring up their problems or ask help from their colleagues. We noticed that these WhatsApp groups we created for the trainings were actually good platforms to practice this kind of supportive interaction. So the support colleagues can give for each other can empower the whole school community. During the project, the participating schools also created their own WhatsApp groups, which were intended to work as internal information platforms from that on. I think there are opportunities to create even wider network between the schools which operate in the same area. And the best thing was that with help of mobile technology, the Finnish teachers were able to visit the Ugandan classrooms, follow the real situations there, see the environment, see the resources, and support their teaching for many weeks, which would have been difficult to implement in this scale any other way. And according to the Ugandan teachers' feedback, this was the best part of their training, and they could see changes in a class environment already on a short basis. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And then let's focus a bit to the future. We've heard about the challenges from the infrastructure, from the lack of technology or the incapacity to use the technology, to the challenges in teachers' qualifications of making use of what is available there. But what should we do? There are dangers that this will bring even a wider gap in terms of access to education, quality education than before. But definitely we see the trends. Digitalization is there. What would have happened in Finland during the COVID crisis if we had not these technologies available and so forth? So how can we ensure positive outcomes from this change and trends that we find? And indeed, have you seen already some positive changes? So I know that Kefas, you have at least some examples of that, but let's start with Sari. Orientation to the future, what should we do? And then Kefas.
Ooh, this is a hard nut to crack, I would say. Let's say that during the past 5 or 6 years, there has been a tremendous progress in digitalization in Cambodia. So I'm not saying that the next 5 years there will be like a digital revolution, no, but it can be foreseen that there is a rapid growing going on. It may mean that more families also in the rural and remote areas have access to electricity supply, which of course enables them to have, for example, Wi-Fi connections and so on, or in community buildings or so on. Portable Wi-Fis could be one solution in places where village people gather together, either to learn or to discuss. In Cambodia, also there are some mobile libraries touring around the communities. These mobile libraries could be seen as solution to providing people at least occasional access to online resources, to online learning. But still, there is a question of financial means. Not every family can afford a smartphone. If they can, they are mainly basic models. So perhaps then all the applications, programs, they need to be light in a way that they can be used with unstable data connections. And possibly these could be like the short-term solutions for digitalization and using them in inclusive education.
Thank you, Sari. And Kefas, any changes in the last years and some prospects to the future?
Yes, thank you so much, Tommy. In the first place, I want to say that from 2015 to date, I have seen improving digitalization in Ramwanja. When we started training the first lot of trainees, none of them had a smartphone. But as of now, many people have adopted using smartphones, especially those ones that we have trained, got jobs, and started earning. They have bought themselves smartphones, so they are using different digital platforms. But for the future, I would say that we need to use the most cost-effective platforms, like the mobile phones. And then we need also to train TOTs that will continue train others in the digitalization. And then also need to make digital information accessible and shared offline without need of using the internet or the network, especially in Ramwanja, where it is still a challenge. We need to use offline digital platforms. And then on this, I have a conclusive remark about the digitalization. Whereas digitalization offers effective solutions to learning in the modern world and has turned the world into a global village, the digital divide between the urban and the rural areas is very wide, which plays to the disadvantage of the learners in the rural settings and the fragile settings like Ramwanja. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Tuuli, go ahead.
Thank you. We need digital solutions, platforms, and applications that are free, easy to use, built for use on basic mobile phones, adaptable to different levels of infra. And for example, in Finland, the private sector is constantly launching new digital innovations for education sector, like learning games and collaboration tools. So cooperation with these companies could help to find new ways of delivering the trainings and support to these fragile contexts. And when accessing to the internet is no longer a problem, it may narrow the gap between rural and urban areas. And when free learning applications and games are available for everyone, it can have a positive effect on literacy rates as well. Technology could support lesson planning, teaching large groups, especially assessment process, which now is done by hand and too hard to carry out. Technology could also offer solutions to special education and extra help. One of the main reasons for the high absence rates in schools is the challenging weather, for example, floods. So internet would help to contact the children and support their learning when they are not able to come to school. Also, at the moment, communication between teacher and parents is one of the biggest challenges. It would help the schools to share information and also to contact with local authorities like healthcare, social workers, aid workers to collaborate with the school. And with help of technology, education professionals would be able to access the classrooms despite the long distances and weather challenges, and implement follow-ups after trainings, and also to give more individual support for the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuuli. And we try to address a few of the questions in the chat box. So if somebody could prepare, could Kefas, you prepare to answer a question related to how can we improve the quality of education in crowded classrooms? And I can comment on a couple of ones like Teachers Without Borders. How do we finance? We get some finance from the government of Finland, but also we finance that through our other income sources as FCA. In general, we can say that the Teachers Without Borders is based on the Finnish teachers. So in that sense, it is very sustainable in terms of finance, or as sustainable as it can be. Of course, there are costs involved because we also want to send them in the quality way that there are infrastructures to support our teachers. But during the COVID, we've also realized that a lot can be done over the internet online without basically any costs except loss of perhaps time and some salaries and all of that, but that is a good point in that. And then there is a question or a comment on the local government level. FCA is very keen on work on all levels, so our idea is that when we work on the ground with the communities, the lessons learned, we use them with different local government level or ministry levels to then influence education policy. And we do a lot of advocacy work in Finland towards EU, towards our funding partners, and we are playing a key role in many global forums, for example, those who address humanitarian education and set the standards for that, INEE, with UNICEF, with UNESCO and other such platforms. So definitely we are doing advocacy work on that and trying to awaken the local ownership on a governmental level as well, which is of course very crucial for the success in the future and the sustainability of the change that we have been able to participate in. Of course, everything that is durable, it's locally driven at the end of the day. But Kefas, do you have any comments on improving the quality of teaching in crowded classrooms? And of course, Tuuli and Sari, if you have a quick comment on that.
Yeah, it is very brief. Thank you very much, Tommy, once again. On this, I would like to suggest that the best way of improving this is to train more teachers, because one of the challenges is the teacher-pupil ratio. So we need to train more teachers that can support children, and they be divided in different classes and we have different streams. For example, when you look at Raumanja, you find a class has 200 pupils. taught by one teacher, meaning if we had more teachers, the classes can be divided. We have manageable numbers of children. Also need to build more classrooms, because once you talk about dividing these children, it means demands for more classrooms where they will sit. And they also procure instructional materials that will be used by teachers, like textbooks, and also learning materials that can be used by children in learning. So that's what I can share as of now. And of course, continue training the teachers in pedagogical skills so that they can manage these numbers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kefas, very practical. Sari and Tuuli.
Thank you, Tommy. In our trainings, we focus on classroom management and how, for example, how you can use outside areas in teaching, how you can take the children out under the trees, like Sari said before, so that because the classrooms are really crowded. And how you can in classroom, how you can use pictures and signs to help the management, how you can how you need to have rules, how to work with the children, this kind of things. Sari, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you, Tuuli and Kefas. I fully agree with you. It all comes to pedagogical approaches. Of course, it's an issue. For example, here in Ostrołęka, where I'm visiting right now, I think it was a year ago, the first grade had over 60 students. So learning is quite challenging in big groups like that, but by training teachers, introducing new approaches and methods that are fit to the contexts here, that solves some of the problems. Also, what would I add? Like Tuuli mentioned, that the classroom is not the only place or the only location where learning can take place. There's the whole community wide open here to explore the schoolyard and so on. In Cambodia, still the very traditional teacher-led methods are prevailing. So even pair work, group work, they are methods that are used more and more every day, step by step. But unfortunately, the financial resources are limited, so the class sizes cannot be reduced in a way. In smaller villages, in smaller schools, like where I am now, there's usually one class per each grade. And then all the children from this village, from the nearby villages, they attend the grades accordingly.
Thank you so much, Sari, and thank you for all of the panelists. It has been great to work with you. Thank you for the participants that have been participating. Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. So just a final vote of thanks for also the University of Jyväskylä for collaborating with us and letting us collaborate with you in this. I think this is a common cause. And we are here as many of us from Finland or people who are interested in Finnish way of educating and educational systems. Of course, they cannot be transported, but we are a nation that we promote good educational practices and we see the value for business and everything. I think the fact is that however we view digitalization, it definitely is one thing that is at the core of inclusion, and that train is on the move, and we need to make best out of that moving train and try to direct that to the right direction in our policy work wherever we do, in our discussions, and try to overcome the hurdles that are of course many, but there are also many even in the current primary schools, leaving out the primary, I mean the digitalization aspect of it. So there are always a number of obstacles on the way, but we need to do together the best we can to increase awareness, to enable infrastructure, to influence policy, and this we can do together. In one of the biggest and most powerful countries in the world, an election time is coming, and I remember a couple of elections ago there was a slogan, "Yes, we can," and I think it fits well also in conclusion of this panel. Yes, there are hurdles on the way, there are challenges, a number of them, but still we can overcome them. In some places a little bit more slower pace than the others, but we can. And thank you. We are very excited to see all of you, or feel you in a way online together in around this important matter. So huge thank you for everybody who has made this happen. Thank you so much.
Many thanks. Bye-bye.
Yes. Thank you from Cambodia too.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very, very interesting to hear your experiences.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.